My stints were Stan Kenton. I mean, in the beginning was El Boleto, the band out of New Orleans, and then Maynard Ferguson and Stan Kenton, and then the European thing with the Max Greger Big Band in Munich, and then coming back, and I went with Buddy Rich, and then Louis Bellson, and of course Henry Mancini. I worked with Henry for like almost 30 years. Oh. But I have to say, in all the band leaders that I worked for, Buddy was the one. It's a great shame I didn't get to work with Basie. I talked with Basie a couple times. He heard me play with Louis, and he said, "I'd like you to play with the band sometime." And my heart started beating. I would love to have gone on that band and played with that band. And it's after the fact now. I don't want to do it the Ghost Band. I wouldn't consider it. But to have done it when Basie was there and been around him and been able to, like, hands-on with all the history and yeah, that would have been a thrill, because my likes lean toward that kind of big band. I mean, that kind of swing, that kind of energy that band had. I loved it. Well, but getting back to it, like, of all the, because this has to be documented, Buddy Rich was the only real band leader I ever worked for. He told you truths. Mediocrity did not exist in his vocabulary. He was very hard on people, and he expected them to give as much as he did in the band. But if something went wrong with the band, I mean, something happened, if there was any kind of scene, he'd push everybody out of the way. He'd say, "You deal with me. This is my band." I know some of the leaders, and they were all very good, they'd back up, and it's your problem. You deal with it, you know. You got it. Buddy was incredible. He knew exactly what he wanted out of a piece of music, and he'd sit out front. He didn't read. He had a lot of insecurities and he never gave you that impression with how he played. He had a lot of insecurities. He didn't read any music. He didn't know a lot about music, except he knew what was good and he knew what he liked. Nothing more, nothing less. And if you stood up to play and you stepped on it, you can be sure you would never stand up to play again.
He's a hard man. Yeah.
Well, it's good to hear. I mean, you phrase it in a positive sense. That he was a...
Well, the people that put him down are the people that were mediocre and that couldn't play, and they hated him. I think it's a very simple. I mean, you talk to Sweets Edison about Buddy, and he says, "Oh man," I mean, he gets like rekindled. You get ready to play, man, and Buddy'd be there, and he'd be propelling you along, making it easier for you to play.
He loved upstate people, too. Joe Romano, Pat LaBarbe, all these people, Don.
Salinistico played, right?
He loved those upstate players because there was a lot of certain energy coming from the upstate people, you know. Right from Buffalo all the way down to New York.
And you know, of course, the great line from Buddy Rich when he was getting ready to go in for brain surgery. The anesthesiologist asked him, they were getting ready to wheel him in, they said, "Mr. Rich, is there anything you know of that you're allergic to?" And he said, "Yes." He says, "Country music." on his deathbed, he still had that kind of dry sense of humor. I have a video somebody just sent me of Buddy Rich singing and dancing and playing. I mean, it's an hour-long video of him on the Ed Sullivan Show, on this show, on that show, and he does a song and dance routine on the Steve Allen Show, and you should see him tap dance. I mean, it's nothing short of Gene Kelly and Fred Astaire. And he could improvise. He could get out there and do the whole thing.
I saw him in Batavia, New York, a long time ago.
He was an incredible talent.
At the Mancuso Theater, and he was dancing then.
That comes out of that vaudeville training.
I may have been about 15, 16, and went down with my older brother.
Well, what a great thing for a drummer, you know, to
and
start
he could
with
sing.
the
rhythm.
He could sing too. I mean, and on this tape, it's like a song and dance and play routine. He comes out, he sings this song, he does a little tap dancing with a big arrangement that they had done for Steve Allen's show. And then he sings some more, and then he suddenly winds up on drums and plays this tremendous shout chorus with the band, and then this tremendous solo. And then he stands up and he says, "That was nothing." And for him, it was.
Well, I have to ask you about the recording you made, of course. In fact, even in in the Grove Dictionary of Jazz, it mentions Channel One Suite. And it seems like there's been certain times in jazz history where people have recorded things, you know, Illinois Jacquet with his, I guess it was Flying Home, and Coleman Hawkins, Body and Soul.
Stan Getz Early Autumn.
Yeah, and this particular recording, I'm interested in, was that the only live recording done of that particular chart, first of all?
No, there is there's a new recording that's coming out on CD. It was live at Ronnie Scott's. It was Buddy Rich's 50th birthday, and they're reissuing that. There's also a beautiful concert hall where Benjamin Britten used to go and give his premiere performances up in not Canada, north of London, called Maltings. Maltings on the Snapes. Snapes are like a it's like a swamp area, bogs.
Marsh or
bogs and marshes. Yeah, you know, that's what they are. But Maltings is a beautiful old concert hall, very, very experimental, and a lot of flat surfaces, reflecting. And anyway, we did a television show there, and it was recorded there. There is a studio recording of that same album, of the Mercy Mercy album, that got shelved because we were in Buffalo, New York on my birthday in 1967, or 1968, and Buddy, I remember Buddy telling me as I was playing more and more, the cadenzas got longer. He said, stretch out. So in Buffalo, on my birthday, I really took it out and did a 5-minute cadenza in one breath, you know, circular breathing and everything. And he went out in front and dropped a cigarette, and he said, oops, it's one of those Don Menza roll your own, you know. This is that Kleinen's music hall, right? It's, you know, and I'm saying, oh, no, you know, and I was going to be I was going to be the brunt of his jokes all night. He said, why didn't you play like that on the record? And I said, well, you told me to play shorter. I said, but now that the band sounds so good, why don't you do the record live? And he said, get your own band, kid. You know, like, and this is in front of 3,000 people.
Yeah.
Well, the wind-up was, 2 days later, he gets on the bus and he says, and everybody get your act together. And he said, if we're playing good now, I want it even better. We're going to do the album live at Caesar's Palace in July.
I was backstage when you guys did that.
Okay.
I was working across the street.
And we did it, and that's the gospel truth. That's exactly how that. And Liberty or Pacific Jazz still has the studio recordings of those tapes.
Well, you've probably had people tell you this before, but, you know, my roommate and I just used to sit and listen to that piece over and over and over. And I was one of the unfortunate people that, you know, of course, our college band got the arrangement. And I had the part, you know, so no matter what you did, you could play really well, but everybody's, well, sure wasn't much like what Don played.
You know, I played it every night, and I had a bag of tricks, and the bag kept getting bigger and bigger, and I had all the space in the world. He never told me, hey, cut it short. He never once said that, no matter how long or how absurd or bizarre I got with what I played. He says, you got it, that's your, and people said, you have to see him on the drums in back of you. And he's got his foot up on the bass drum, and he's listening, looking at me, laughing, you know, and like sometimes he'd egg me on, yeah, that's it, go ahead, you know, he said screaming at me, you know. And it was great. He gave me all the space in the world. He never once handcuffed me. Okay, one night, Joe Romano and I partied all day in New York. My daughter had just been born. This was October of '68, and we were working at the Riverboat. And Joe Romano and I walked in, and I had bought a box of Havana cigars, and we had been drinking all day, and we walked in, and we did look a bit disheveled, you know, and I'm trying not to look at him, you know, and the Riverboat, they had buttons on the floor right where I sat, and I have to press the button to turn the lights on, and then there's another button to step on to open the curtains. Well, I could see him looking at Joe, and Joe has this classic look about when he's been partying too much, his hair down in front of his face. I didn't have that luxury, you know. and Joe is sitting there, and he's you know, it's like warming up, and Buddy goes over and pulls his locks from his eyes, and he said, and then he looks down at me, and I'm fooling with my reed. I'm trying not to look at it, you know, and of course with me, my eyes are bright red. And I'm trying not to look at him, and he said, and he says, okay. He says, Willow Crest, which is a tenor alto feature, and he used to play it fast, in three, you know, and he'd start playing and he'd scream, Willow Crest. He says, Menza, get the lights, get the curtains. Well, I reach over and press this thing, and all the lights go out. I press the wrong button. And then he says, the lights, and I'm trying to, and the lights are blinking on and off, and I can't get the curtain thing to work. And finally, I stand up, and I'm trying to find the button, and I'm looking at him, and I'm like this, and I press this button. The lights go on, the curtains open, and I'm out in front of the band, like looking at it, and he's cut the band off. He said, this isn't your band. He comes out and closes the curtain, and he got on my case and Joe's case. He said, you guys ever come on my bandstand like this again? And then he started laughing. He said, what have you been doing all day? And the people are waiting for the concert. I said, my daughter was born last night. He says, congratulations. He said, you didn't bring me anything? I said, yeah, I got you a cigar. I got a bottle of wine. I got a bottle of cognac. He said, come here, he likes a cigar. Pour him a bottle of cognac, and the curtain opens, and he starts talking to the people about my daughter. Oh,
He's nuts. He was nuts, man.
Oh, it was.
Buddy was a natural guy. He just did what he thought.
Yeah,
at
absolutely.
that minute, you know.
yeah.
And that night is the night where my father-in-law and all my relatives from Long Island were in to the riverboat to hear us play, and we went up to the bar, and they wouldn't let us stand at the bar. They says, this isn't for the band. You guys go down. I says, don't move. And I went down. I said, hey, buddy, they won't let us. My family's up there. He says, who? And he's in the dressing room, slippers. This is after the first set, with a bathrobe, and he's had his tube off. He says, who? He walked straight through the club, up a big circular staircase that looked like Gone with the Wind. He says, where? I said, that guy over there. He says, you ever mess with my band again? He says, we're out of here. He says, guys, the drinks are on me.
Oh, man, that's great stuff.
But he was incredible. Yeah, that's, you know, like, you hear a lot of bad stories. A lot of people don't like him. A lot of people, he was too arrogant and everything. He was a pussycat. He really was. And I tell you, he's sorely missed. That's the kind of drummer that helps. He knows about playing the time. He knows about when to get exciting. You know, maybe not my favorite way of playing, but I never heard anybody play any better.
There's like a little bit of a negative story on that thing. It's a joke, you know, but this guy calls after Buddy had passed and calls Buddy's number, and I guess his wife or somebody's daughter answers the phone. It says, Buddy Rich there, please? Big lull, you know. And says, well, Buddy passed on, you know. He says, oh, okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, jeez.
I mean, that's
I heard the
Yeah.
same thing about Benny Goodman.
Right.
Well,
It's a
that's
joke.
That's
Sure.
another
Yeah, this-
whole hour program, Benny Goodman.
So, right. We've had some stories, but you know, most musicians are fairly protective of one another.
Oh yeah, most of the time.
I really enjoyed your perspective on him because
It's different from what you.
yeah.
I mean, it's unreal. When he was in the hospital, I remember going to see him. I was on my way to Europe, and Chuck Finley and and Joe Romano stopped to see him. You know, we had a ride to the airport, so we stopped at UCLA, and this was just after his operation, and his left arm was gone. His left arm was totally paralyzed. We never saw him again. He had died while we were in Europe, and his left arm was paralyzed, and he'd be laying there, and every time he'd yawn, his arm would raise. There was something in the nerve system and everything, and his arm would go up and then fall. And while we were there, Jake Hanna came in, and Jake went over and gave him a hug, and Buddy started crying, and he was, you know, he's a very humble man, really. And he said, Buddy, he said, you're going to be all right. You play more with one hand. And he said, no, Jake, look at this. And he picked up his hand and dropped it, and Jake, in his quick sense of, fast, sharp sense of humor, looked at Buddy, and he says, now you know how we feel when we hear you play.
Oh boy, that's